We finally know what was going on in this mysterious panel from JJK, so let's talk about it. But spoilers if you're not caught up through chapter 258. Alrighty, y'all, so I cannot believe we finally have an answer to this freaking soul swap panel. And not only that, I believe this also provides our answer to the "we cheated" panel. What exactly did they mean here? Well, thanks to chapter 258, we now know that it was Ui's technique that allowed for this soul swap. It didn't have anything to do with Yuji's soul perception or his soul punches, like many of us thought. But no, it was the groomed one who is stepping in to be the MVP here. And I have been digging through all of the various translations I can find in order to glean as much as I can about how this works, and here's what I've put together so far. We know that he can only do it once a month, but also alludes to the fact that he'll be able to do it twice before they fight Sukuna. So there must have been like the end of one month and then the start of another one fell within this time frame. Not only that, he needs to have consent in order to swap people's souls, which Gege a little on the nose talking about consent with the groomed one, but we'll let it slide for now. But this also answers a potential, not plot hole, but obvious battle tactic against Sukuna would be to just have him come in and swap the souls back into Yuji, right? Well, he can't do that because Sukuna obviously wouldn't consent to that. Now, the interesting things we can piece together from here are that knowing we have two swaps and both are at least going to involve Yuji, we know one went with Kusakabe. Who might the other have gone with? But real quick, since I glossed over this, the reason they're doing this soul swapping training is because of Yuji's unique position having been the vessel for Sukuna. Because Sukuna's cursed energy was in his body so long, it basically made him built different, just like Sukuna. This is why Yuji is such a prodigy and able to pick up on things so quickly, because his body is used to special grade jujutsu from housing Sukuna. So, we already know that one of the swaps went with Kusakabe, and that was so Yuji could learn the simple domain and, some basic kind of cursed energy manipulation in that form. So, who else did he swap with? And the only other thing we know is that Choso insisted it would be somebody with reverse curse technique, so Yuji could learn that. Alright, but before we speculate on who Yuji's second partner is, we need to talk about the nuance of Ui's technique. So here's what we know. He told us he can do it once per month, but then he'll be able to do it twice before they fight Sukuna. The first thing we need to talk about is, does swapping back count as one? Meaning, if you swap Yuji and Kusakabe, is that one? And then if you put them back in their correct bodies, is that two? And me personally, I don't think so because, one, I just don't think it would make sense for Ui to specify that he could do it twice before they fight Sukuna if all he meant was putting them back in their right bodies. I think it means he can do two completely different swaps. Also, because we know Yuji is going to learn RCT as one of these swaps, and Kusakabe presumably doesn't know RCT, so he wouldn't be able to teach Yuji that. And Kusakabe also says, "I'll be your first swap, Yuji." So there should be two separate instances of swapping. Now, the other thing we need to talk about is, can Ui swap multiple people at once? Because there was nothing said that he could only do two. So maybe when he swapped Yuji and Kusakabe, he also swapped Akotsu and Choso and Hakari and Meme, right? And maybe that all happened counting as one swap. Now, do I know that to be the case? No, but it could be possible, especially because we know not only did Yuji get stronger, but Akotsu got stronger, Choso got stronger, and presumably everyone else did as well, but not necessarily. But at the very least, we know Yuji learned RCT and Choso learned RCT. So if Yuji swapped with Kusakabe and that's one, then there's not enough people for both Choso and Yuji to have swapped to learn RCT. Now, it's possible that Yuji swapped with somebody, learned RCT, and then just helped guide Choso through learning it, but I doubt it. So for my money, I think when we can swap, he can swap a bunch of souls at once, and it only counts as one use of the technique. Meaning they had two group swaps before Sukuna, in my opinion. So I want to know y'all's thoughts, if you follow my logic there, and if you agree. And if you disagree, let me know, and let me know how you interpreted it. But with all of that out of the way, let's now try to figure out who else Yuji swapped with. Also, shout out to Steven, who asked who I thought Yuji swapped with, and he thinks it's Gojo. All right, so in my opinion, it had to have been one of these four, one of the four known RCT users at that point in the story. Shoko, Gojo, Akotsu, and Hakari. And real quick, I think we can cross Hakari off of the list since his RCT is fully automatic due to Jackpot. It's probably not the best way to teach somebody else, right? So that leaves us with these three. And let's first talk about Gojo, the honored one, right? He obviously knows RCT, but on top of that, he is just built different. And if, Yuji learned a lot from Sukuna's body, imagine what he could learn from Gojo's. However, there's an argument to be made for these two because they are the reigning supreme RCT users because they can do it on other people, right? Gojo is not capable of that. So if the mission was to specifically learn a nuanced RCT, then perhaps you would pick Shoko or Akotsu over Gojo. Now, here's where we need to talk again about the nuance of Ui's technique. Because if he can only do 2 swaps and it's only, one pair at a time, meaning Yuji was the only one involved in swaps, then it would have to be Akotsu. Because Akotsu said, we cheated. And I don't think he would have phrased it that way unless he personally was involved in this strategy that he considered cheating. Not only that, in the chapter where that happens, Sukuna is impressed at Akotsu's growth. The fact that he has managed to figure out how to use this domain expansion and only target Sukuna, even though Yuji was also in the domain, right? So Akotsu learned a lot. So it would make sense that he was involved in one of these swaps. So again, if there were only 2 swaps, only involving 2 people, it has to be Akotsu. But if the group swap theory is correct, then that opens a whole lot more doors, right? And honestly, Akotsu swapping with only Yuji, if the only 2 swap theory is correct, doesn't really make a whole lot of sense why he would have learned so much, right? It doesn't seem like he could have learned too much from Yuji. Yuji could learn a lot from him, sure, but how did Akotsu refine his barrier techniques just by being in Yuji? Doesn't super add up to me, so that's another +1 for the group swap theory, and maybe Akotsu and Gojo swapped for one of the swaps. But if the group swap theory is correct, I think it has to be either Gojo or Akotsu. So I don't think it would have been Shoko, just because even though she is the best RCT user, I think you go with Akotsu even if you want the RCT on others' experience, because Akotsu is going to give Yuji so much more plus that, right? And then, of course, same with Gojo. So if it's the solo swap theory, it's Akotsu. If it's the group swap theory, I'm leaning Gojo, but it could still be Akotsu. And again, I think the group swap makes more sense considering Akotsu got stronger, Choso got stronger, presumably Ino, Higuruma all got stronger. So citing back to Steven's question, could it be Gojo? Potentially, I'd put it at like a 50-50 between these two. Now, one other thing that we might have learned from this chapter is since Uii can only do the technique once per month, this might have been why Gojo set the fight with Sukuna to be a month later on Christmas Eve. Perhaps he knew that about Uii and wanted to, use that to their advantage. Now, if that's true, I wonder why Gojo didn't use that way earlier in the series. Now, maybe there wasn't a definitive need for it. Maybe Mei/Uii wouldn't be willing to help unless, the circumstances were this dire. I don't know. There's a few reasons we could make sense, but it at least gives us another reason for why Gojo would postpone the fight on top of the other things we've speculated, needing to go regroup with everybody after seeing that Sukuna was in Megami's body, yada, yada, yada. Alrighty, y'all, this one got far yappier than anticipated, so thank you so much if you made it this far, and be sure to let me know your theories in the comments on this one. And also, let's pray for Uii, because I don't even want to imagine how Mei was taking advantage of this technique.